The tension in the studio was palpable. Bright lights glared down on the set, illuminating every crease of expression, every nervous twitch of a hand. Millions of viewers were tuned in across the country, waiting for the inevitable clash. Tonight's broadcast wasn't just another political debate, it was being billed as a defining moment. And at the center of it all stood two men, Senator Alex Padilla of California and Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. Alex Padilla had built a reputation as a bold, unflinching advocate, known for his sharp rhetoric and fierce defense of progressive policies. He had entered the debate determined to corner Kennedy, a man whose folksy humor and razor-sharp comebacks often left opponents stammering. For weeks, pundits had speculated that Padilla would finally be the one to put Kennedy on the defensive, to expose him as more soundbite than substance. As the cameras rolled, Padilla leaned forward, his eyes locked on Kennedy. "Senator Kennedy," he began with a firm voice, "you talk about being for the people, about standing with working Americans, but your voting record tells another story. How can you claim to fight for families when time and again you've sided with big corporations, against healthcare reforms, against measures that would lift millions out of poverty?" His words were sharp, deliberate, meant to sting. The audience murmured, leaning in. This was the strike Padilla had promised. For a moment, Kennedy said nothing. He simply tilted his head, his lips pressed together in a half-smile, his eyes calm and unblinking. He had faced harder battles than these both in politics and in life, and he knew better than to rush an answer. Finally, Kennedy leaned toward his microphone. His southern drawl was steady, his tone disarmingly gentle. "Senator Padilla," he began, "I don't doubt your heart. I think you mean well. But where I come from, folks don't measure a man by how loud he speaks or how many accusations he can throw in 30 seconds. They measure him by whether he keeps his word, whether he helps his neighbor, and whether he tells the truth, even when the truth is inconvenient." The room grew still. Padilla blinked, clearly not expecting that turn. Kennedy continued, his voice firm but never rising in anger. "You asked me how I can stand with working people. Let me tell you something. I was raised in a small town where my daddy worked 2 jobs just to put food on the table. I watched my mama clip coupons, count pennies, and pray every night we'd make it through. I don't need a lecture about poverty from someone who thinks compassion only comes with passing another $1 trillion program. Sometimes compassion means making sure the economy is strong enough so that fathers don't have to work 2 jobs. Sometimes compassion is giving people opportunity, not dependency. And sometimes compassion is telling folks the truth, even if it costs you votes." The silence was deafening. Every eye in the studio was glued to him. Padilla shifted, trying to interject, but Kennedy held up a hand not to silence his opponent rudely, but as if he were guiding the audience through a story too important to interrupt. "You see, Senator, I've met the families you talk about in speeches. I've walked through their neighborhoods, eaten at their kitchen tables, and I'll tell you this. They don't want pity. They want a fair chance. They want dignity. And that's why I fight the way I do. Not for headlines, not for applause, but because I remember where I came from. And I'll never forget who I serve." For a brief moment, you could almost hear the hum of the studio lights above. Padilla lowered his gaze, his confident edge dulled by the weight of Kennedy's words. It wasn't a policy paper or a debate point, it was something deeper. Something real. The moderator, stunned, struggled to regain control of the conversation, but the audience had already decided what they had witnessed. Kennedy had not only answered the challenge, he had transformed it into a message that cut through politics and touched something universal. As the broadcast ended, the clip of Kennedy's response spread like wildfire across social media. Viewers replayed his words, not because they were clever, but because they were heartfelt. People who had grown tired of endless bickering felt, for once, that someone was speaking to them, not at them. In the days that followed, commentators dissected the exchange. Some praised Padilla for pressing hard questions, others lauded Kennedy for his unshakable composure and authenticity. But for ordinary Americans, the factory worker in Ohio, the single mother in Texas, the small business owner in Georgia, the moment stood as a reminder that politics wasn't just about points scored on TV. It was about values, about heart, about remembering the people behind the statistics. Alex Padilla, for his part, privately admitted to aides that night had been a lesson. He hadn't been embarrassed. Kennedy hadn't mocked or humiliated him, but he had been humbled. It was one thing to spar with words, another to stand in the presence of someone whose conviction came not from ideology, but from life itself. And John Kennedy? He returned home to Louisiana the next morning, as he always did, quietly slipping back into his routine. When a reporter asked him about the viral moment, Kennedy shrugged and said, "I just told the truth. Folks can decide for themselves." The story closed not with a victory or a defeat, but with something far more powerful, a reminder that authenticity, spoken with heart and rooted in experience, has the power to silence even the loudest room. Because sometimes, the greatest strength in a debate isn't the sharpest argument or the fiercest attack. It's the quiet courage to tell your story up and let the truth speak for itself.